did what you had to do. Do you know any of them? The ones outside?
Night of the Living Dead is a remake that quietly suppresses expectations. It proves a classic can rebuild without losing its identity, and remains one of my all-time favorite comfort horror films. On the surface, it looks like a fairly faithful retread of George A. Romero's 1968 classic. Same farmhouse, same boarded up windows, same flesh-eating zombies outside. But once you sit with it, you start to realize that Tom Savini's version is way more interested in how people choose to survive than just if they survived. You got Ben, the practical hands-on survivor who wants to fortify the house and fight. You've got Harry Cooper, the selfish bunker guy who wants to lock himself in the cellar and let everyone else fend for themselves. And then you got Barbara, who starts in shock but gradually becomes the one character who sees the situation clearly and makes the least emotional, most rational choices. So in this video, we're going to break down how the 1990 remake reframes survival, why Ben and Harry could never work together, and why Barbara quietly becomes the reasonable center of the story. We also dig into some behind the scenes context that explains why she was rewritten this way and how Tony Todd and Tom Savini's approach this version of Ben and the farmhouse dynamic. The 1990 Night of the Living Dead wasn't some random studio cash grab. It was actually a way for Romero and his collaboration to finally regain control of their own work. The original 1968 film fell into the public domain because of a copyright notice mistake, and Romero saw almost no profit from what became one of the most influential horror films ever made. When 21st Century Film Corporation showed interest in the remake, Romero came back on board to rewrite his original script with producer John Russo, and they brought Tom Savini, famous for his makeup work on Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead, to direct. Savini originally signed on just for effects, but Romero convinced him to direct, which I'm glad that he did. On paper, that sounds like a dream team. In practice, Savini has said that the production was the worst nightmare of his life, and that only 40% of his ideas made it to the final film because of the studio interference and ratings issues. That sucks. At the same time, Romero and Savini saw the remake as a chance to rework the characters, especially Barbara. The original Barbara was famously criticized as passive, almost catatonic after her brother dies. In the remake, Romero explicitly wants a more venomous Barbara, someone with agency who could function more like a modern final girl. That decision is what tilts the entire survivor dynamic of the movie. The farmhouse looks like a simple horror setting, but the remake uses it as a pressure cooker for competing survival philosophies. You've got 7 people crammed into a single building while the dead slowly gather outside. Information is limited, panic is high, and nobody really knows the rules yet. Ben wants to control the space, board the windows, secure the doors, defensible area. Harry wants to retreat from the space, get into the cellar, shut the door, and minimize exposure at all costs.
I shut this door. I'm not opening it again until somebody comes who can get us out of here.
Somebody like that comes will try to remember to call you.
Barbara, meanwhile, goes from traumatized newcomer to someone who looks at the situation strategically. She noticed how slow the zombies are, questions whether it even makes sense to stay inside the house, and start thinking beyond the immediate argument to the wider landscape. The film doesn't just ask, can you survive the night? It asks, what kind of person do you become when survival is the only metric that seems to matter? And that's where Ben and Harry start to fracture. In the 1990 version, Ben is played by Tony Todd, and his performance is a big part of why this film still hits. Todd was stepping into a role that Dwayne Jones had already made iconic in 1968, and he talked about how much he respected that performance and wanted to honor it while still making the character his own. Ben in this remake is highly competent, but he also visible stress, anger, wounded by what he's seen before the film even starts. He's not calm. He's a static action hero, he's exhausted, and that exhaustion is part of why he clashes so hard with Harry. From a survivor standpoint, though, Ben is absolutely the guy you want in a crisis. He takes immediate control of the environment, reinforcing the doors and windows, moving furniture, turning the house into a fortress instead of a hidden place. He shares information, he talks about the truck, the gas, the mob he encountered, and what he's seen the zombies do, instead of hoarding info for himself. He thinks in terms of offense and mobility and not just defense. He's willing to risk going out to the gas pump, get the truck, and move people and resources instead of waiting to be overrun. But we see exactly what happens when that plan falls apart. But the movie is honest about his flaws. Ben has a temper. When Harry challenges him, he doesn't always de-escalate it. He escalates. The gun becomes a symbol of control in the house, and Ben wants that control just as much as Harry does. His survival skills are better than Harry's, but he's still human, still angry, still capable of making emotional choices in the middle of life or death situation. That becomes a crucial we talk about why he and Harry can't work together. Because on paper, combining Harry's caution with Ben's competency actually might have worked. It's their ego collusion that kills that possibility. Harry Cooper in the 1990 remake is even more abrasive than his 1968 counterpart. Critics and fans are describing him as the more obnoxious and meaner this time around, almost to the verge of satire. But that's part of the point. He represents a very specific kind of survivor mentality. I live, everyone else, an option. Harry's core belief about survivor are simple. The safest place is in the cellar, one entrance, one door, no windows, maximum control. Other people are liabilities, even his own wife and daughter. He only cares about them when it aligns with what he thinks is safe. Where Ben shares information and tries to coordinate, Harry hoards information and tries to dominate. He isn't thinking in the terms of how do we keep as many people alive as possible. The 1968 film emphasized the racial tension between Ben and Harry as part of the conflict in the 1990 version. Writers and critics often frame more as a clash of egos and personality, two men who both want to be right, no matter the cost. Now, the racial subtext never fully disappears, especially given Tony Todd's casting, but the remake leans harder into the stubborn male pride in the engine of destruction. Harry's survival plan fundamental is to turtle, hide in the basement, hope the danger passes, and avoid exposure. Ben believes that survival requires action, reinforced scouting, gather supplies, moving vehicles. Harry believes that survival requires withdrawal, minimal movement, minimal risk, total isolation in the cellar. These two mindsets could theatrically complement each other. Defending the house now, retreat to the cellar as the last result, but neither man is able to frame it that way. By the middle of the movie, their conflict is no longer about zombies, it's about who allowed to define reality inside the house. And while they're busy fighting over the philosophy of survival, Barbara quietly starts to realize that both of them are missing the big picture. Patricia Tallman, that plays Barbara, is the biggest change in the 1990 remake, and the main reason the film feels like its own thing rather than a straight copy. Now, Romero and Savini wanted to turn her from a passive victim into a more feminist figure, as I said earlier, someone with agency, intelligence, and more clarity. She still starts out in the shock. The cemetery scene with Johnny plays similarly to the original teasing, the "they're coming to get you" Barbara line, the attack in her panic fight into the farmhouse. But instead of remaining in a catatonic state, Barbara begins to process the trauma and adapt. She's observant, not reactive. While Ben and Harry are yelling about where to hide, Barbara is watching the zombies carefully. Just notice how slow they move, how clumsy they are, how much distance you can get just by walking quickly and staying calm. Now, several analyses point out that she's the first character to realize that the zombies are not unstoppable movie monsters, but predictable, avoidable threats as long as you don't trap yourself. She questioned the premises. The men keep arguing over which part of the house to defend, as if staying in the house is non-negotiable. Barbara is the one who says, in effect, why are we even here? Why are we defending a death trap instead of leaving? Her perspective reframes the entire debate. She's thinking on a larger scale beyond just the immediate turf war inside the farmhouse. Because of all of this, Barbara in this remake as a kind of a final girl, standing in contrast to Harry's selfishness and Ben's tragic stubbornness. By the time we reach the ending, the film has played out the consequences of each philosophy. The house falls, the barricades don't hold, the cellar isn't a miracle bunker, it becomes a tomb for Ben. Barbara returns with them and discovers Harry's still alive and proving that his bunker mentality worked in a narrow sense, but instead of treating him like a triumphant survivor, she shoots him. It's cold, but it's also framed as a judgment. This man is selfishness, help doom everyone else. She won't let him be the one to walk away as a winner. That's what makes her the reasonable one. She's not just trying to survive the night, she's just trying to survive with her moral compass intact. In a world where everybody else is either shutting down, digging in, or burning out. Ramirez rewrote his own script for the remake, giving him a chance to address things he others weren't happy with in the 1968 version, especially Barbara's character. Tom Savini wanted a more grounded character-driven film. Despite being known for gore, he said he intentionally kept the violence more restrained, focused on the mood and character interaction instead of non-stop splatter. Savini's version was heavily compromised by ratings boards and producers, forcing him to cut multiple violent scenes for an R rating, and he said that the interference is part of why the film underperformed and why he never directed another feature like this. Tony Todd cast as Ben as was a career-defining move. Interviews credit this role with setting him on the path to become a horror icon, especially with Candyman 2 years later. Patricia Tallman wasn't just an actress, she was an accomplished stunt performer, which made it easier to turn Barbara an active, physical, capable survivor instead of someone who just screams and collapses. So when you sit down and watch Night of the Living Dead, the real question isn't just Ben or Harry who was right. It's what does this remake say about how people choose to survive? The film doesn't give you a neat comfort answer. Everyone pays a price, but it does suggest that the most reasonable path isn't barricading yourself inside or hiding underground. It's learning when to move on, when to let go of ego, and when to recognize that the real monsters might not be the ones outside the window. Hi, and welcome to the Dark Side. Thank you for staying this long towards the end of this video. Please make sure you like and subscribe, and until then, see you later.